Denver Broncos head coach Sean Payton was very critical of wide receiver performance in Sunday's win against the Carolina Panthers. Could there be some personnel changes coming? We'll tell you why we think that could be possible and who that might be here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, Broncos Country? Welcome into another episode, Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you know it's your team every day. Thank you so much, Broncos Country, for tuning in, making us your first listen. Shout out to all the everydayers out there for making the show exactly what it is. I'm Cody Roark, Broncos reporter for Mile High Sports, joined as always by Sayre Bedinger, the longtime site expert and voice over there, predominantly orange.com. And Broncos Country, here's what you can expect on today's episode of the show. We'll wrap things up by talking about a report from NFL Network's Ian Rappaport and Tom Pelissero. Could Baron Browning potentially be traded by the deadline, which is approaching up next week? We'll also talk about how the Broncos can better support Bo Nix and the personnel around him. And more importantly, we'll kick things off with some spicy action here today. Sean Payton didn't mince words when talking about some of the missed opportunities, particularly at the wide receiver position in Sunday's win against the Carolina Panthers. We'll break all that down here on today's show, which is brought to you by our friends over there at PrizePicks. Go to PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Sayre, Sean Payton, look, I think one thing what we've seen from him, even after a Broncos win, you know, he never lets things get too high, like too exciting. Like he acknowledged the good, but he touched on some things that he's very, very concerned about as it pertains to missed opportunities, especially with some tougher teams coming up.
Yeah, and Sean Payton knows, and he told the team this, that the Broncos, they're going to play in bigger games than they played against the Carolina Panthers. We've seen a number of his quotes from after that game kind of circulating around, like he kind of called out the Panthers offense for not being a very good offense, and he also called out his wide receivers for the fumbles on multiple occasions. Cody, I know that we heard him say after the game that the fumbles are just unacceptable from the receivers, obviously referring specifically to Lil Jordan Humphrey fumbling on the Broncos' first possession of the game, resulting in a Carolina Panthers touchdown, and then Courtland Sutton fumbling there at the goal line late in the fourth quarter, which took 7 more points off the board. And yes, they would have been style points at that point, but it speaks to a larger issue that the Broncos have really had all year long. The wide receiver position, whether it's fumbles after the catch, whether it's dropping the ball, whether it's, running the wrong route. I don't know what all the issues have been, but Payton was fed up, and he said it on 850 KOA after the game. Like, if this doesn't, we may have to get new wide receivers, basically. I mean, to paraphrase what he said. And so it's just one of those things that, man, Payton is feeling what I think a lot of the fans are feeling after watching that performance.
Yeah, what he said here specifically verbatim to Dave Logan, according to the KOA broadcast, it can't just be my bad or we'll find some other receivers. Obviously, that was said immediately following the game there. And I think even after the game, Sean kind of touched on a little bit further as it pertains to personnel, painting that cleaner picture around Bo Nix. Here's what he had to say.
For a rookie quarterback, and look, I think all of these are steps, confident steps. We've seen it. The key is, and I've said it, the key is around him. Are we good enough at these other positions around him? All right. And that's what we're constantly looking. We have to paint the picture. And when we do that, we'll have success. We'll move the ball. Today, we're much better on third down, better in the red zone. 2 wide receiver fumbles. It just is what it is. Bothers you.
Bothers him. And he's got a high standard for that room. And I think Bo Nix even said it in his postgame presser that the thing he appreciates the most about Payton is that Payton has such a high standard for every player on this team. I mean, Sayre, you hit the nail on the head a little bit earlier here today by talking about the fact that all season long, there have been different things that have popped up a little bit with just inconsistencies in the Broncos wide receiver room. Courtland Sutton had his biggest game yet this season, 8 catches for 100 yards on 11 targets. But then you look for other people around him, just missed opportunities. We talked about Troy Franklin, the one went through his hands. My stance on Troy isn't going to change. I think you continue to try to build Troy's confidence. We've seen what he can do in the short yardage situations. He's just got to learn how to track the football a lot better on those deep ball opportunities there from Bo Nix. I'm not down on Troy Franklin. Obviously, there's room to grow. He can improve, but he's a rookie. Let him, he's going to, like we've said with Bo, let him grow. He's going to get there. You look at other guys stepping up and making plays there. Devon Vele is a great example. Didn't have anything flashy in terms of numbers, but you talk about big catches, is certainly on a third down situation. Devon Vele is becoming a little bit more of a consistent role player here as well, and could see more playing time going forward.
Which I would love to see, because he's got strong hands. We've seen that dating back to training camp. In fact, the guy doesn't even always need both hands. We saw that highlight reel catch that he made back at camp, and he's continued that into the regular season, just proving that he can make those tough catches and he can make plays after the catch as well. But nobody in this wide receiver room has been exempt from blame at any one point this season, whether it's Marvin Mims, whether it's Lil Jordan Humphrey, whether it's even Courtland Sutton, even Josh Reynolds has dropped a number of passes at times. And so I know Josh will be back hopefully in the near future. I know we haven't got a chance to talk about him and that crazy situation, at least you and I together, that crazy situation with him. But man, we'll talk more about Josh as the week progresses here. But I think in the current state of this wide receiver position, where Sean Payton is clearly at after last night's game, is like, I mean, he found the notion of, I think even just somebody saying, hey, was Adam Troutman the number one in the progression? He found that laughable, and he had to back off a little bit. And he's like, with all due respect to Adam, that's the state of the skill positions for the Broncos right now as a whole. It's like you can't really rely on anybody consistently. And even your best guy, Courtland Sutton, he goes from a game where you have 0 official targets to a game where now you got 11 targets. And it's just that up and down, right? And it just can't happen. And the reason is because the Broncos don't have anybody that's consistently threatening opposing defenses other than Courtland Sutton. So you take Courtland Sutton away from the game, you force Troy Franklin to make a play. Well, Bo puts the ball in the breadbasket and he doesn't come down with it. You force Lil Jordan Humphrey to make a play. Matter of fact, the Broncos featuring Lil Jordan Humphrey in the offense, manufacturing touches for him, not only as drive starters, but in the red zone, getting him targets. I don't understand the justification for moving forward with the status quo. Something has to change, whether it's promoting A.T. Perry or David Sills off the practice squad or going out and making a move.
I think there could be competition here coming up in the next couple of weeks. And look, here's the thing for Sean. I think there's a sense of urgency. Like when I hear him talking about the personnel and some of the same issues that have been plaguing them on a week-to-week basis that do impact quarterback play, right? And it goes back to even Bo Nix's footwork that, against New Orleans, where I asked Sean the question in his Monday presser after that game. And I said, what is the coaching points there in terms of that? And he says, really for the quarterback, it's our footwork. You either have a 3-step drop, 5-step drop, or even a 7-step drop. And it's like his footwork has to marry with the routes, the depth of the route. So it's like, are the receivers getting the right depth? Does that impact things? How does pressure impact everything? When there are inconsistencies in that, it impacts the operation of the quarterback, the offensive line, and everything else in general. So I think as the Broncos, as Payton is happy that they're 5-3, he understands, hey, the job's not finished. You have to find a way to, especially as you're facing some tougher teams coming up, you have to take care of business. And I think that's where the urgency is coming in, is that, hey, we're at the point now, we're at the timeline where these issues that we've been struggling with since week 1, they can't keep happening, or else there are going to be some changes. And I think in the next week and a half, we might get some clarity on that. But, you could see, as you mentioned, David Sills, you could see A.T. Perry. You could see other guys getting featured in this offense, and you could see some other guys' roles being reduced a little bit. I know the trade deadline is coming up, which obviously sparks some connections in terms of some conversation. Do the Broncos, are they in a place right now where they can realistically add playmakers for rookie quarterback Bo Nix? As the trade deadline looms, we'll highlight that and an internal focus here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Today's Locked On Broncos is brought to you by our friends over there at FanDuel Sportsbook. And look, Broncos Country, FanDuel, they want you to get in on the action with a big return this season. If you're an NFL fan, they encourage you to get involved with a big return this season, all inside of America's #1 sportsbook. FanDuel has everything that you can be looking for while the game is going on. If you get a hunch, if there's this thing called momentum, which is very real in the NFL, contrary to the reports out there, momentum can be a real thing that changes the tide of a game. And now you can place live bets inside of the same place where you put together all of your action. You see live play-by-play. You can see stats as they're happening. And then if you have an educated guess, you can maybe make a hunch if the line changes here. Well, the Broncos, they're going to open up this week on the road as 8.5-point underdogs, according to our friends over there at FanDuel Sportsbook. And if Denver can find a way to sneak one on the road against Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry and company, hey, FanDuel at 8.5, you might be able to capitalize into some good opportunity there. Is you can get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. So you go on the FanDuel Sportsbook app, you place your first $5 bet. If you win, you get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. Just visit FanDuel.com. Once again, that's FanDuel.com.
We've discovered the problem. The Denver Broncos need playmakers, but realistically, could they actually add anybody? We're talking about the trade deadline on today's episode, Locked On Broncos, and whether or not the Broncos might make some deals or at least try. And you know that your boys, Cody and Sayre, we're going to have you covered every single day here on Locked On Broncos. So shout out to all of you everyday listeners of the show. Shout out to all of you subscribers, and shout out to all of you who make us your first listen of the day every single day. We appreciate you so much, and let us know your thoughts. What do you think the Broncos should do here, Broncos Country? Because it is a problem. The receiver position, the playmaker department for the Denver Broncos has been an issue. Who could realistically be available at the NFL trade deadline? Well, Cody, you kind of alluded to some reports that have been circulating from NFL Network's Ian Rappaport and Tom Pelissero. Obviously, they're two of their top insiders over there. And you look through this post, which was published late on Saturday night, a number of names that pop up in this post in terms of the playmaker department. I think unrealistic would be Cooper Kupp. The Rams, they're not going to be moving off of Cooper Kupp, not for anything less than a really high draft pick. And I just think that they're maybe even just being polite by listening to teams. Some other names that pop up on this list, though, I'm just going to go in the order in which they're mentioned. KJ Osborne, Mike Williams, Deontay Johnson, Adam Thielen. Those are a few names of receivers who could still be available after Amari Cooper was traded. Devontae Adams was traded. And there's always guys that, pop up on the radar eventually as well. Or maybe guys who, hey, nobody's talking about this guy being traded, but a team asked and a team, received, So you just never know when you ask what could happen. Christian Kirk out for the season. He's no longer really an option there. What are your thoughts on those names? I mean, do any of those move the needle for you, especially given the fact that, the closer we get to the trade deadline, I mean, frankly, the more the price is probably going to go up.
Yeah, and I think you look at teams' situations changing. Carolina, obviously, you mentioned Deontay Johnson, Adam Thielen. I just don't see any of those guys coming in right now and making a big difference, for Denver offensively. And granted, look, I agree with you. I don't think the status quo, and Sean Payton certainly agrees, it can't stay the same as it has been going right now for Denver. They need playmakers to emerge here. I don't see Deontay Johnson being that type of guy here for Denver. And look, obviously, going back to his time at Pittsburgh, he's a guy who struggled with drops. Do you want to bring in a guy who that's still a factor part of his game when Denver's already dealing with issues like that already on the offensive flow? Adam Thielen, just not who he used to be. He's gotten older. He's been dealing with some injuries. I'm not sure about that. You mentioned other guys. I mean, we can even look. Christian Kirk, I know, was a popular name brought up. Obviously, the injury kind of changes that, as you mentioned. Cooper Kupp's not leaving LA, as you said. Even Sean McVay's come out and said, hey, we're not getting rid of Cooper Kupp. If Sean McVay has a say in it, and he comes out and he says it flat out, I don't think that it is happening. But then again, you've seen things change over the course of the NFL where it's like, hey, teams get desperate. Like, hey, we will give you this for this. Like the price, it may drive the price up, but, it could lead some teams biting initially. I don't see right now, Sayre, Denver going out at the trade deadline, making a move to add a playmaker, a wide receiver, when the reality is, I don't know if there's anyone out there right now that's going to come in and make a significant difference right away. Not to mention having to learn in the middle of a new season, a brand new offense, so to speak. I mean, look at Marquez Valdez-Scantling, just signed with the Saints last week. He didn't even play. He was inactive because he's still trying to learn the playbook. And they need help at the wide receiver position there in New Orleans. So is it a move that you should make right now? I don't know. And also, I think maybe we can ask ourselves the question here about tight end. There's guys like Evan Ingram. I think he would obviously maybe be a potential joker role type of fit in Peyton's offense. I just don't see Denver parting with capital right now to acquire a player unless they know for sure that that player is going to give them instant value right away. And it's hard to imagine right now, right? Because we don't know. Like the circumstances change on a week-to-week basis around the league. Is it a gamble right now for Denver to make a move? I think so. I think that Denver right now, they like their young playmakers that they also do have on the practice squad. You mentioned earlier, David Sills the fifth. You mentioned A.T. Perry. They like these guys as developmental guys, and that development might be further along now, considering Denver's trying to find a spark there. I like where Devon Vele is at here. I like where Troy Franklin is going to be. Get him more involved in the short passing game, and then still try to find a way to help him improve on those deep shots. That's really the area in which he struggled since training camp. And then at this point, continue to roll Cortland Sutton, but I think we've already seen like where things are at with Marvin Mims in terms of the receiving game. Like he's got speed, but man, we're just not seeing that production there. So for me, I think Denver looks in-house. I don't think that they make a trade. I think they stand pat at the deadline.
Well, let's play a little devil's advocate here and
I love
talk
it.
about the other side of it, because there's obviously a lot of people out there who are like, hey, I mean, go get the guy and take the risk, right? Go take the risk of Deontay Johnson working out in your offense and see, because he's one of those types of guys that people look at his game, with the quickness, the after the catch ability, and you say, hey, that's a guy that you just tell him get open on Hut basically, and he'll go create offense for you. You mentioned like Evan Engram and the likes, of those tight ends who could potentially be jokers. Can those guys come in and do simpler stuff in the passing game and allow you and afford you an opportunity to make kind of everyone around them better just by their presence on the field? We kind of talked about that when we discussed the idea of like an Alvin Kamara, who obviously has been given a new contract by the Saints, which was very odd to see given the state of things there right now. But with Kamara or somebody like that on the field, you kind of figure, hey, that guy's going to just at least make everything better for everybody else, because, well, now defenses have to kind of focus, like, what's he going to do? Because if he does get the ball, he's a threat with the ball in his hands. That's maybe the type of person that the Broncos need, or somebody that can get open quickly on simpler stuff to get acclimated to the offense and kind of, work as you learn, sort of a thing. I know the Broncos did have interest in Adam Thielen in free agency. I can't remember if that was last year or this year. I can't remember when Thielen was a free agent last, but the last time he was a free agent, when Sean Payton was the head coach, the Broncos had interest in Adam Thielen and bringing him in. So could you rekindle that? Could you do a late round pick swap with the Panthers and take the risk? Could you just say, hey, this is a guy that when Andy Dalton came back to the lineup, Adam Thielen went out there and played some really good ball before getting injured. So is it a risk worth taking? Is it a risk worth taking to potentially make Bo Nix his life a little bit easier or even a little bit better with somebody that could bail him out on some of these throws that he's making the throws? The receiver is not catching the ball. So is it a risk worth taking to, say, try a late round pick swap or to throw a pick for Deontay Johnson or even a Mike Williams who gives you a broad catch radius deep down the field? I mean, we know Sean Payton loves the big receivers. So I'm just throwing out there the devil's advocate, because I do agree with you, Cody. I think that you have to assess the risk. If you give up, let's say, a third round pick for Deontay Johnson, who's the player that you're giving up, in next year's draft that could be a piece for you for the next 4 or 5+ years? So that's the question that you do have to weigh in this. Is this just a short-term rental for this season, or is this somebody that we legitimately believe could get a second contract here in Denver?
Or, maybe the possibility presents itself. Teams could call Denver about guys like Jarrett Stidham or even Zach Wilson. Maybe that can involve a player in a late round pick swap for another player potentially. If there was anybody that I could say out of everyone we talked about here, Mike Williams would make a little bit more sense to me. Big body guy, still has the ability to go up and get it. Bo Nix isn't going to underthrow a red line pass to him and then blame him in the post-game report there. But the thing is that you do have to evaluate like 2024 here. Denver right now, they're exceeding all expectations, which is great. Now they're in a position to compete, and obviously they want to win this year. But it's also, I think, about building for the future. And with that in mind, you have to weigh the risk reward. Okay, as you mentioned, if it is a third round pick, could this potential third round pick be ammunition for us to move up into round 2 potentially to be able to land a guy? Everything is on the table here, I think, for the Broncos. I'm very curious to see how it goes. On Broncos Country, as always, we want to know your thoughts. Should the Broncos take the risk of trading for a potential playmaker on the offensive side of the ball? Is it risk too high, or is it worth taking? Make sure you let us know here Locked On Broncos. That's not the only other report that came out following Sunday's game. The Broncos could potentially look at trading Baron Browning by the NFL trade deadline. Something came out from Ian Rappaport and Tom Pelissero of NFL Network. Will highlight the pros and cons of that and what that move may look like if that is the case here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Today's Locked On Broncos is brought to you by our friends over there at Hillsdale College, and time is our most precious commodity, so don't waste it scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours. How can you spend it wisely to improve yourself? Education is obviously very important. You can learn history, economics, the great works of literature, the meaning of the U.S. Constitution. Did you study these things in school? Probably not. Or even if you did, it's been a long time since I've been in school, so I might need a refresher there. And time and technology have changed a lot of things, and they've maybe changed some of the basic fundamental truths about the world and our place in it and how we understand it. So that's where Hillsdale College comes into play, because they are offering Locked On Broncos listeners 40 free, that's right, free, F-R-E-E, online courses, including Constitution 101, the meaning and the history of the Constitution, Introduction to Free Market Economics, The Great American Story, A Land of Hope, and The Rise and Fall of the Roman Republic. On top of that, other courses across the board. Like I mentioned, 40 free courses that they're offering listeners of Locked On Broncos, and all of Hillsdale's courses, they are self-paced so that you can start whenever. You can tune in wherever you're at. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, and discussions, or you can just enjoy the lecture. So check it out today. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. hillsdale.edu/lockedon. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over there at Prize Picks, and Prize Picks is daily fantasy sports done the right way. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least two players to win up to 100 times your cash. So run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Prize Picks invented the flex play, which means that you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect, and you can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks, and you can sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. So check it out today. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Once again, download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. As we jump into the fourth quarter action on today's episode, Locked On Broncos, will highlight some potential trade rumors as the NFL trade deadline is fast approaching. Coming off the heels of the Broncos win against the Carolina Panthers, Baron Browning's name has been thrown out there into the mix. Broncos Country, real quick, want to say thank you so much for taking time out of your day to watch us or to listen to us wherever you get your podcast, making Locked On Broncos your first listen. If you're not already an everyday listener, become one. Listen to us every single day, because we have an episode for you every single day, all year long, even in the offseason when you want to stay up to date with everything that's going on with your favorite team, including all the rumblings, bonus episodes, and trade rumors. One of the latest trade rumors, Sayre, after the Broncos win on Sunday, the trade deadline is approaching. Ian Rappaport and Tom Pelissero put out an article, was in the one that you mentioned there, about who could be on the move, who's untouchable, so to speak, in a sense. I found it interesting that they brought up, obviously, Baron Browning is a potential trade candidate who could be available to some teams that may be looking for a pass rusher. I also found a little bit interesting in there that it said that Jonathon Cooper could also be available. I want to know your thoughts on this, because, Sayre, I think including Jonathon Cooper's name in that is ridiculous. That would not be a great move here for Denver. Cooper's obviously playing some of his best football, and he stacked it 2 years in a row. This has kind of been a prove-it year for Jonathon Cooper because he did it well last year. He's been incredible opposite of Nick Bonito, who's obviously having a terrific season himself. Cooper's name being involved in this, I don't understand it. I don't like it. I mean, I understand with where Baron is at, the injuries that have impacted him, unfortunately. I understand if his name gets thrown into there. But between these two guys, I mean, Cooper's name being thrown in this is laughable to me.
Yeah, it's very surprising. And I think it just kind of reflects the state of where kind of people perceive the Broncos from the outside looking in, is that Hey, they've got some good players off the edge there, like Jonathon Cooper, Baron Browning. They're hitting contract years this year, obviously. So their names are going to pop up with other teams out there that may be perceived as stronger contenders than the Denver Broncos. You know, these teams that all need pass rushers this time of year. I mean, we look at the Dallas Cowboys, who, you know, they're probably still considered in a better light than the Denver Broncos by a lot of national media folks, even though they're 3-4 at this point. And so I think that it's, you know, teams like that, the Detroit Lions that need pass rushers. You look around the league. All right, the first thing you look for is who are the teams that people perceive to be bad? Well, the Broncos are one of those teams for a lot of people. And secondly, who are the pass rushers that are in the contract year? That could be 1-year rentals for teams, especially with, you know, little cap space to work with. So I can see why Jonathon Cooper would draw interest for the Broncos, but I think out of these two, Cooper and Browning, like Cooper is way more likely to be re-signed at the end of this year than anything else, especially when it comes to being dumped at the trade deadline. Like, unless the Broncos get an offer for like a second-round pick or something like that, and even then, you might have to be like, I don't know, this guy's like a starting edge for us, and he's been very productive as a pass rusher all year long. I could see Baron Browning being traded, Cody. Jonah Ellis has played well when given opportunities. Even Dondre Tillman has played well. Nick Bonito, a 6-game sack streak. And then if you still keep Jonathon Cooper, like the snaps could diminish for somebody as the season goes along. So I could see the Broncos trying to get value for somebody like Browning. Maybe it comes in the form of a playmaker like we discussed.
Possibly that too, but I also think maybe an eye to the future because I think Drew Sanders. I don't think he's going to return to off-ball linebacker. I think they're going to keep him. Sayre, when like seeing him, like I saw him last week, he's got the body type of an edge rusher. Like he's big upper body, like he's staying in shape. He's doing really well, progressing on the team's side field. Obviously, he's in their plans at some point. You mentioned Dondre Tillman. If they were to move on from Baron Browning, obviously the rotation would then be, you got Jonathon Cooper, Nick Bonito as your two guys. And then when you go into your backup rush, which there's a heavy rotation there in certain situations, it goes to Jonah Ellis and Dondre Tillman. And then you factor in maybe introducing Drew Sanders. Not sure if that's going to be this year or next year. You reintroduce him into the mix here and you have your 5 guys there. I think we've seen it clear as day. You need a pass rush in ways. And as great as Nick Bonito and Jonathon Cooper have been, those guys can't be on the field every single down in a game. Like you need to have a healthy spell. That's why there's a good rotation, not only just at outside linebacker, but you look at the defensive line, you got Jordan Jackson rotating in, you got Malcolm Roach rotating in. That way, guys like Zach Allen, John Franklin Myers, DJ Jones, these guys are all staying fresh throughout the course of a game. And that's a strength here for the Broncos front 7 that they've desperately tried to revamp. The pass rush is a big part of that as well. And right now the rotation has been Baron Browning, Jonah Ellis as that secondary group, but there are teams out there that could have interest. We'll see if that is the case. I had a chance to talk to Baron after the game on Sunday. And look, Baron has had just, I think, an unfortunate string of luck when it comes to injuries. The foot injury was unfortunate. He told me, it's football. Unfortunately, that's just something that happens. It was his goal to play 17 games this season. Disappointed that wasn't able to happen. It's just the game, though. And obviously, I think he understands the business side of it. He wants to stay in Denver. It's a tough situation, as the game and other players are progressing a little bit right here and taking advantage because of the injuries that have impacted him. It's just unfortunate because I love Baron Browning. We love him a lot. Just a fantastic human being on and off the field. We've seen the flashes, like when he's healthy, what he can do when he's on the field. And I think that he's just got to find a way to get his confidence back there. And look, if the trade deadline comes and goes and he's still on the team, he's going to work extra hard to be able to make that happen, to make a case for himself there. But if not, if he ends up elsewhere, he's going to use that as an audition to continue to play at a high level. And very excited to see how that may turn out for him.
And right now, 0 sacks and 0 quarterback hits for Baron Browning. Like you mentioned, it's kind of just been frustrating. You want to stay on the field for all 17 games. You obviously want to make an impact. And the unfortunate thing is that I guarantee you the offside stuff drives Sean Payton absolutely bonkers, when he watches it back and when he's seeing it live, like those little things over time. So I wouldn't be surprised, Cody. Barron's got a lot of friends in high places around the league. Obviously, he's been on this roster for a number of different coaching regimes at this point, including Vic Fangio, Evero, who's obviously now with the Carolina Panthers, and a number of other position coaches that are elsewhere around the league. Would not be surprising at all to see other teams have interest in him. Matter of fact, I mean, why don't we just talk about that Panthers thing? Like, swap something with the Panthers, scratch each other's backs there. The Panthers need pass rush help. Barron needs an opportunity to improve his stock before free agency. The Broncos need a playmaker. That makes a lot of sense to me as a potential option.
I see the Jets, the 49ers as a couple of teams as well that could have potential interest in him. We'll see how things continue to kind of shape out. Pittsburgh could even also be another option that could emerge here for Barron in terms of trade interest. But obviously the trade deadline, folks, is a little bit over a week away. We'll have you covered leading up to it. There could be moves that happen before. There could be moves that happen right up to the deadline. And Locked On Broncos is the place that you need to be for all your Broncos news, content, coverage, and also more. So thanks to all the everydayers and first listeners out there in Broncos Country. We appreciate you. For tomorrow's episode of the show, here's what you can expect. Broncos Country, Patrick Surtain understands, hey, these next two games for Denver, they are huge. And the team, they are locked in on trying to go and get 2 road wins here against 2 very formidable opponents. You'll hear from Patrick Surtain following Sunday's game. We got some locker room stuff for you there. You can hear that and much more on tomorrow's episode, Locked On Broncos.